In the Caribbean's turquoise calm, war shadows gather. A US strike leaves survivors for the first time, and questions are multiplying. Is this counter-narcotics or covert warfare? A top admiral resigns, Caracas mobilises, and the UN warns of a killer roaming the Caribbean. A crisis brews where law, power and truth collide. In the turquoise waters of the Caribbean, where fishing boats and smugglers often blur into one another, the United States has opened a new military front. For the first time, according to a US official speaking to Reuters, a US strike on a suspected drug vessel left survivors. He said that the US military carried out a new strike on Thursday against a suspected drug vessel in the Caribbean, and in what is believed to be the first such case, there were survivors among the crew. The revelation, which has not been previously reported, raises uncomfortable questions in Washington. Was the strike meant to leave survivors? Were they rescued? Are they now in American custody? The Pentagon hasn't said, nor has it explained whether these men are now considered criminals, terrorists, or prisoners of war. To date, US strikes against suspected drug boats off the Venezuelan coast have killed at least 27 people. The Trump administration insists those killed were narco-terrorists. But experts are questioning the legality of the campaign and whether the United States has quietly entered a shadow war in the Caribbean. Videos released by US officials show boats obliterated in direct hits. Until this week, there were no survivors to tell what really happened. And now the military's chain of command appears shaken. Admiral Alvin Halsey, the head of US Southern Command, which oversees military operations in Latin America, has resigned 2 years ahead of schedule. His departure follows internal tension over how these operations have been conducted and who controls them. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced on October 16th, praising Halsey's service but revealing no cause. Senator Jack Reed, the top Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, said the move deepens concern about America's drift toward undeclared conflict.
Admiral Halsey's resignation only deepens my concern that this administration is ignoring the hard-earned lessons of previous U.S. military campaigns and the advice of our most experienced warfighters.
Meanwhile, President Donald Trump confirmed that he has authorized CIA covert operations inside Venezuela, adding to fears in Caracas that Washington is preparing for regime change. What began as so-called counter-narcotics mission has now evolved into a military confrontation edging perilously close to Venezuelan waters and possibly Venezuelan territory. At the United Nations in New York, Venezuela's ambassador, Samuel Moncada, stepped before the cameras holding a newspaper from Trinidad and Tobago. On its front page, a report of 2 fishermen killed at sea. He pointed to the headline and said something that froze the room.
Guardian, a newspaper in Trinidad and Tobago, denouncing the killings of 2 humble fishermen yesterday or the day before in Trinidad. I mean, there is a killer roaming around the Caribbean, is bloodthirsty, is killing everyone which is on the sea working, and people from different countries, Colombia, Trinidad, etc., are suffering the effects of this massacre.
Moncada's accusation was direct and unprecedented, that the United States was conducting extrajudicial executions in international waters. He told reporters Venezuela had sent a formal letter to the UN Security Council, demanding an investigation into what he called a series of assassinations.
We respectfully ask the Council to, first, investigate the series of assassinations that the government of the United States of America has been perpetrating in our region and determine their illegal nature. Second, confirm the threat that these illegal actions pose to the preservation of the zone of peace character of the Latin American and Caribbean region, including as a result of the extrajudicial executions, the concentrations of the U.S. military forces near the Venezuelan coasts, the bellicose rhetoric of the government of the United States, against Venezuela, and the clandestine operations of the CIA with a license to commit political assassinations in Venezuela and the region as a whole. And third, lastly, issue a statement reaffirming the principle of unrestricted respect for the sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity of states, including Venezuela, as an indispensable basis for maintaining international peace and security.
The letter, seen by Reuters, calls on the Security Council to reaffirm the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Venezuela and to declare the strikes illegal. Moncada went further, saying the US was fabricating a pretext for war.
It's no justification at all. They are fabricating a war, and everybody should stop pretending that this is a complicated matter and face the truth. The emperor is naked. Nobody dares to say it, but the emperor is naked. They are going for war for no reason.
The Venezuelan envoy claims that among those killed in the latest strikes were 2 fishermen from Trinidad and Tobago, caught in the crossfire of a campaign that began in September. According to Caracas, the United States has carried out at least 5 strikes, leaving 27 people dead, including civilians from neighboring states. US officials, however, insist the campaign is lawful. They argue that the United States is waging a legitimate war on narco-terrorist networks operating from Venezuelan waters, using Article 51 of the UN Charter, the right to self-defense. Yet the timing and scale of these operations suggest a shift in US military posture unseen since the Cold War. The Pentagon has deployed guided missile destroyers, F-35 fighter jets, and even a nuclear submarine, supported by around 6,500 troops. The force dwarfs anything previously used for drug interdiction. Caracas sees this not as law enforcement, but as preparation for invasion. Inside Venezuela, the mood is tense. President Nicolás Maduro has ordered his armed forces to full readiness, telling citizens that the country must prepare for combat. Wall Street Journal reports that Venezuela is moving troops into position on the Caribbean coast and mobilizing what President Nicolás Maduro asserts is a million-strong militia. But despite the defiant tone, Venezuela's military is underfunded, ill-trained, and no match for the overwhelming US firepower offshore. On state television, Maduro called America a rapacious Nazi-like state, hungry for oil wealth. Analysts say this strategy serves 2 purposes: to rally domestic support and to warn Washington that any invasion, however small, will ignite a nationalist response. Still, the risk of miscalculation is rising fast. Every strike, every intercepted boat, every death at sea increases the chance that this counter-narcotics operation could spiral into a regional conflict. And within the Pentagon, power struggles are emerging over who should command it. Just last week, the Defense Department quietly reassigned leadership of the Caribbean operations away from the Miami-based Southern Command to the 2 Marine Expeditionary Force, a rapid deployment unit from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Such a move is virtually unheard of, suggesting the Trump administration wants tighter civilian control over an increasingly volatile mission. For Admiral Halsey, whose resignation comes amid questions of legality and ethics, it was the breaking point. As one senior defense source told Reuters, there had been tension between Halsey and Hegseth over operations in the Caribbean and questions about whether he would be fired. The administration, meanwhile, is moving ahead undeterred. Officials say traditional law enforcement measures have failed and that lethal force is now justified. Behind the rhetoric lies a larger strategic calculus. Venezuela's prolonged economic crisis and political isolation have weakened state institutions and regional influence, creating a strategic void that Washington fears rivals like China and Russia could exploit. Moscow has already accused the US of weaponizing counter-narcotics policy as a tool of regime change. Beijing, too, has echoed calls for restraint at the Security Council, warning that US actions could undermine the peace architecture of Latin America. For now, the United States insists its mission is limited. But with covert CIA operations now authorized and survivors from the latest strike reportedly in US custody, the boundaries between law enforcement, warfare, and politics have all but vanished.